It is 1:05, and although I'm not a project manager, I do like starting things on time. So welcome everyone to this free webinar that we're doing together on why good campaigns fade and how to prevent it this time. So we'll get into intros in a second, but just a few quick things. So, hey, Derek. Okay, nice. Now let me just accept this other person in. So, we'll jump straight into it, right? We designed a little session for many of our peers and colleagues and perhaps even clients because we realized that there was an interesting discussion to have around what we defined as point one, the three biggest problems with modern communications. Point two, how pre-testing and thinking about pre-testing through a behavioral science lens can help solve these problems. And then last but not least, because theory can only get you so far, how to actually start getting colleagues and clients to back bold creative ideas for the long term instead of just the next quarter, because there is certainly a lot of that. All you need is a new senior stakeholder, and suddenly whatever equity you built on a previous brand platform is gone because they want to do something new. And so we wanted to tackle these three things together. Before people ask, because people always ask, we will share a recording. So don't worry about it. If the day doesn't, if I don't lose the grip of my day, I'll probably even share it today, at some point towards the end of the day. We're going to do some intros, just so you know who you are, although some of you might know who we are because we know each other. But my name is Rob. I'm the founder of a one-person consultancy called Salmon Labs. I've been writing strategy and about strategy for about 15 years. I've worked with a series of agencies, primarily based in London, like Droga5, Wednesday, VCCP. And according to this photo, I really like pointing at things. So yeah, that's me. And I'm going to pass on to Easy to introduce himself and then kind of set the scene and get us started.
Hi everyone, I'm Jiří. Hard to pronounce, so Jiří is totally okay. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Behavior Labs, just currently like 60 people, and we're basically measuring brand ads and market for hundreds of brands, a lot of mid-market challengers growing fast, but also dozens of like big names like IKEA, Lego, T-Mobile, as you see here. And yeah, like the ultimate reason why behavioral science is useful is because of what people say is not what people do. That is something that like interested me a lot already when I was studying marketing research and sociology. Then I worked a couple of years in the marketing myself, and then we started founded the Behavior to do the best what is possible to predict like ads better, rather than just asking people declarative questions in surveys, which can be very misleading. I think we can we'll go deeper into that later. So happy to have you here, and I hope that it's going to be a really useful session for you.
Cool, thanks, Easy. So yeah, we already started this, but yeah, if you have just joined, please let us know where you're dialing in from. And also, if you want to just kind of warm up or maybe vent or maybe a bit of the two, if you could share us a little bit about like what's the biggest challenge you've seen maybe in the last year around selling creative work, because we're going to talk a lot about what we see as the most common challenges, but I think getting a sense from you about like what typically is a barrier for your particular agency or team, I think is a good way to get started. And specifically, I'm encouraging you to participate because we got some prizes, right? Which I know sounds a bit cheap, but they're really good prizes. So you got to go with me on this. So there's three things. One is Behavior very kindly kind of offer to select folks essentially a kind of a heat map test for a video or static ad. And you can do that by accessing this link. I will share the deck as well, so you can see the link there. So just by virtue of you being here, you'll be able to get one of those heat maps. So well done, you. Presence is definitely important. But we also decided, because we wanted this to be interesting and participative, So Behavior have these really like cool brand asset card decks, and they're like really
Wow.
nice to float around in
Here,
that.
those are the cards.
They look great. So they're going to give away one of those for free. And basically, we just want to encourage participation. So the most active person in the chat gets to win one of these, and then we'll arrange separately to get it mailed to you and stuff. And then last but not least, so as part of Salmon Labs, I also run a private community. Some of the people in this call are in it. And so we also have a high value prize for people who are part of that community, which again, I'll send you the link. But essentially Behavior do this really cool hands-on workshop to help teams and clients kind of educate themselves on the benefits of testing, tracking, thinking about behavioral science, etc. So I'll send some more information on this after, but essentially, if you are part of the Salmon crew, which is kind of that membership I mentioned, you will be eligible to win one of those, which we'll choose after today. So enough plugging. Let's just talk this. Let's start with three biggest problems with modern communications, right? So I'll go through this, and then I'll pass on to Izzy to talk about the middle bit, and then back to me, or maybe a mix of the two of us for the last bit. So I want to start with some fairly scary numbers. Not scary, but like just set the scene, right? I love a good bit of stats. So some stats that I think are useful to set the scene. Firstly, Ipsos and JKR kind of studied a series of ads over the last several years, and they actually worked out that there's a very strong correlation between being consistent and being effective. And so we see more and more people, including as well System One, talking about how creative consistency is good for business, which in principle you go, great. But consistency is one part of the puzzle. It's not the only puzzle, because then when you start getting a bit deeper, you go, okay, what's getting in the way of people being consistent? And some stats kind of illuminate this. So Ipsos and JKR also found out through their kind of meta study of ads that 15% of ads only 15% of ads are seen as distinctive, which, generally speaking, most things are quite forgettable, but it's a good reality check to go, most of the work that is being produced is not even cutting through enough. And so there's a lot of money being left on the table. It gets worse. 81% of brand slogans are forgettable, right? Most brand slogans do not stay in the mind, which is their point. Only 19% of brand logos are distinctive, which again, like you go, hopefully we're all kind of highly qualified people in this industry, but hopefully we're within that 19%, but statistically speaking, it's the bar isn't that high. Only 15% of brand assets are distinctive. Again, I'm kind of just beating onto that person now, but it does have a point. Oh, even scarier, only 4% of brand colors are distinctive. So it's always funny when clients and brands go, our distinctive asset is we're green. And you go, really? Is it? Peter Field and System One and Eat Big Fish did this study on the cost of dull, and they worked out that about 228 billion with a B is wasted in media spend due to dull advertising. I think specifically this was on TV, which obviously tends to be a pricier media buy, but still, that's a lot of money that is being left on the table. And closer to kind of the rigor of how people make decisions around advertising, I'm a big fan of the work of Jenny Romanuk, who studies category entry points and distinctive brand assets. And her estimates suggest that if there is no link to a category entry point, between a brand and a category entry point, there's about a 10% buying chance after someone is exposed to advertising. So in other words, you might do a brilliant ad, people look at it, they like it. If they don't link it either to you or to a buying situation of some kind, there is a very small chance that they will think of you in a buying situation, which I know sounds really like predatory and things, but that is why ads exist, to help create the right associations for when you're in market. You're more likely to choose a brand versus the other. And further to that, I was looking at some studies on some of the columns that Mark Ritzen's written, and his estimate is that about 60% of advertising is correctly attributed to the right brand, which means that even if you do like really interesting emotive advertising, again, you need that attribution to be correct for it to work. So what that suggests to us, oh, and just last but not least, is like attribution isn't just put the logo up front. One of my favorite charts of all time is actually the comparison between the ability of certain distinctive assets to create what kind of is called strong branded attention versus the actual percentage of their usage. And so what you see here is that most advertisers over-index on using like logos, colors, fonts, slogans, etc. But actually, the most memorable devices they could be exploiting are things like sound, characters, celebrities. And so the idea that there's this gap is quite interesting because it means there's tangible and practical ways in which we can help our clients stand out. And so what this all means to me is not that, hey, we should all give up. You know, on a slightly more useful level, we believe that this lack of creative consistency, which gets in the way of effectiveness, it's actually coming from the inability for us to prove impact of our work. In other words, we do all this work, and you and I have seen this so many times. There's all this brilliant work, and then you ask, did it work? And you get a response like, oh yeah, it was great. It had 10 million impressions. And you go, okay, that does not answer the question. And of course, without having the evidence of impact, of course, then it's very easy for someone to go, I don't like that creative advertising idea. Let's come up with a new one, start all over again. And because there's no measurement in place, you don't even know if that's the right thing to do. It just feels like it could be an exciting thing to do. So when I met the guys at Behaviour, I got really excited that they specialize in helping track some of these things that give us the evidence we need to help clients and colleagues stick with things for the long run. Because as you and I know, marketers get bored of their ads far quicker than real people do. And so our hope is that, you know, what the knowledge and the platform that Behaviour offers can help us kind of improve those odds for the rest of us. And really, it comes down to three elements, and I'm going to pass on to Yeezy once I'm done with this. But so if you tie back all these different elements of what I showed around distinctiveness, brand attribution, category entry points, these are all very like loaded terms in our industry. But fundamentally, there are three things any good advertising needs to do. It needs to link to a need of some kind that is connected to a buying situation. It needs to trigger an emotion of some kind that helps you kind of, you know, accept the message and kind of notice it and kind of have it be lodged in your memory. But crucially as well, it needs to be linked to the right brand, because a lot of the times you see ads that are brilliantly about a customer need. They are brilliantly emotional and they're funny or sad or whatever, and they get completely misattributed all the time. And so by having these three ingredients in place, you'll be able to get more impact or proven impact and kind of get clients to actually commit to things for the long run. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of use that to kind of lead us to the second section. And so Yeezy, over to you if you want to take over on how pre-testing and behavioral science can help alleviate some of these problems.
Thanks, Rob. So before I go into the concrete cases and different media formats and basically showing you how we can help like maximize those three things that Rob just mentioned, let me briefly explain why they are so important and how we can measure them, how behavioral science can tap into them. And it all starts with this realization that has been around decades in like behavioral science, economics, and other, but not that long in the marketing. Though many years, like this 95% of decisions are subconscious is quite a known fact. But the implications are really, really vast. And the main problem is that if people decide subconsciously, they cannot tell whether the marketing is effective. So there's a study a year Old or something like that by Peter Field. And he actually showed that the companies, I think those were British ads analyzed, that used pretesting, the old way of pretesting, which is basically the most common metric was purchase intention, which was basically asking people, hey, after seeing this ad, do you think you're more likely to buy the brand or the product? So when people said, this ad makes me want to buy it, they typically don't buy it. But it's worse. It's the more they say it, the less they buy it. The problem is because we like to think about ourselves as rational beings. So we typically like say that we're going to buy it if there is some interesting new product information or basically rational information. But that is not how we buy the things. That's subconscious. That's more emotional, more basic, let's say. But people don't want to say. So it's basically worse to pretest with this declarative questions than to do nothing. Fortunately, there's better ways. We're definitely not the ones tapping into that. System One is the famous pioneer here, though I'll show it really that maybe they're a little bit putting too much of the stress on just the emotion. I'll explain why those three drivers are so important. Just to give you the glimpse of how behavioral science works, is basically a lot of ways, creative ways of making tasks for people so that you tap into their emotions and fast associations. So it's not just about like them saying whether there's a link between Christmas and Pepsi, but we measure how fast they do it, because if it takes 4 seconds for them to ask, they're like, hey, maybe Christmas and Pepsi, then it's too long for a decision, because we're making instant decisions, so basically those answers has to be disregarded. Or a way how to measure brand recall in video ads, a good way is this, that you basically send each respondent sees a random snippet of the ad, and they're tasked to type a brand. So then you can see second by second, if you have a lot of snippets, 500 respondents, and each of them sees a different starting part of the ad. It gives you a glimpse which parts of the ads are heavily branded and which are not heavily branded. And because the longer the branded attention, the better the memory building and the harder effectiveness. There's a huge difference between whether there's a logo at the end of the ad or throughout the whole 30-second TV ad. Sorry, there is a question from Rob.
No, don't worry about it. I'll collate them at the end for you. Keep going.
Len. So just a glimpse of how we could go into the details if you want later, but essentially why to measure those emotions and fast links? It's because ultimately mindshare helps you win the market share. What you want to achieve with the communication and long term is that if people are have some trigger, so they're in some occasion in their lap, there's like they want to go shop when they go shopping when there's Christmas, or they go into the fast food. You want to be the someone mentioned salience like a couple of minutes ago in the comments. So this is what really Byron Sharp calls brand salience. It's when there's a occasion and you spontaneously think about the brand, which is the right side. And there's typically more occasions and more benefits in your market. So the total is typically called mental market share, mind share. And this really is well predictive for market share. And what the most effective ads do is basically create those fast links between those important needs and the brand. On the right side, you can see a couple of those brand codes, because they also help. They help you attribute, the ads, but they also are part of the memory structure. And the stronger this memory structure is, if you have more senses here, if you have audio, if you have visuals, it's just stronger. So definitely, if your brand is, if your video ad, for example, is branded just visually and not in audio, it's just creating like weaker connections, and you essentially want to win this game of winning the mind share. So the ads cannot link it all together. You cannot create the link at once from fast food Christmas and hot summer day. You have to do this one by one in your that's basically a strategy, and a small brand can only afford to have one occasion maybe for a couple of years. So basically, we don't have time to discuss the details here. We have what Behavioral does is basically helping you optimize all those three parts, with market tracking telling you where's the biggest gap, what needs and occasions are unmet, and brand tracking, on the other hand, is already how strong you are in those connections, and whether you're using even visual associations and semantic and other to be strong. But today, basically, we're trying to focus a lot into the ad testing and how to create those links between the need and the brand. And the basic principle that is in place here, the basic principle of, like in neurology, is neurons that fire together, wire together. So basically, this is how we learn language, that the things that we perceive at the same time are being linked. So technically, the ad could work if we just showed for 30 seconds in the TV, for example, or for 6 seconds in digital or on a billboard, just thing. And on the other, and it works for B2C and B2B as well. We can go into that detail later on, but the principle is similar. And so we want to show when they should think about you, and then your brands. The problem here, and that's why it's get complicated, is that, and this is getting worse and worse every year, we're paying less and less attention to the ads. So the neurons are not wiring together because they're not firing, because we're not seeing the ads actually. And it's a huge problem, because it's really I think it's like, I think there's a lot of measurement on that attention by Carnens and Field. I think it's like we're exposed to 10 times more ads than we actually pay attention to. And that gets us to the role of emotion in the emotional marketing, because like the role of emotion is basically grabbing attention and boosting the memory. If you look back into your maybe oldest memories you have, you typically felt something strong. You felt like sad or scared or very happy. That's because like emotion helps us really pay attention. That's a part of its role. So it's the best way how to go against this problem with attention. Is basically, if there's something really strong in the first second, we're more likely not like to stay and not to tune out, or not to go into the kitchen, or not to start scrolling the phone when we're sitting in front of the TV. And that is still like quite a great channel for the attention. With the digital, it's getting worse, and the average attention span for like outdoors like 2 seconds. Yeah, so you really need to be emotional, because that's why people pay attention. That's why so basically it's an amplifier. The role of the emotion is the amplifier of this link building between the need and the brand.
Can I have 3 little dorky comments on top of this? Because I mean, most of us here are strategists. We're all a bit dorky about this anyway. But firstly, I find that a lot of clients and sometimes even a lot of agencies think that emotion necessarily means let's make people cry like John Lewis, or let's make them laugh. Like, there are so many different emotions, and sure, we respond more to the negative ones, but there's a wide palette of how to make something emotional. And just bring it back to the B2B question, for example, it's like, well, one of the emotions in B2B is achievement. That is an emotion that you can convey. All it means is don't just do the rational benefit point. So that's one thing I just wanted to add for a bit of color.
Totally. And there's often a question whether negative emotions work. They do. They're very strong. But you have to be careful. There are categories when it's more okay, like insurance. Some categories when you have to be more careful about negative emotions and then being sticked to your brand. But there's a wide palette, and it's not that important which kind of emotion do you trigger. It's more how strongly people feel, because it's basically triggering the memory.
Yeah, and the other thing I just wanted to say, because I've read this a few times over the last maybe like year or so, but it seems to me like the role of brand salience, like there's two roles really, and some categories over-index more on one versus the other. But like sometimes brand salience is helpful for a brand to be remembered at a point of purchase, right? So if I say to you, enterprise CRM, you'll go Salesforce. So you remember the brand that you want to look for example, when you're entering the enterprise CRM category. But for example, for chocolate, you don't always need to remember the brand. You just need to recognize it at point of shelf, right? So even if I go chocolate, you go Cadbury, if you step into a store and all you see is Snickers, you're much more likely to probably buy a Snickers because you recognize it more immediately. And so I find either remember a brand or recognize it to be a very useful framework to think
That's
about,
why
like, how does this category work?
That's why it's good to like measure the brand elements, the brand codes, the distinctive brand assets of us as well in the brand tracking, because sometimes really salience can mean, oh, that orange thing. And when you buy that orange thing, you don't have to care whether you know the brand name or whatever. It's just the connection. So sometimes it's more predictive if you understand what are the elements that people link to your brand. Yeah, so basically that's the framework. How we measure it is basically the more spontaneous and the more implicit it is, the better. So spontaneous is typically when, like, with the static ads, or we try to recreate the attention span. So for example, we show the picture of the billboard for the 2 seconds. That is the average span for the billboard to the people. And then we ask spontaneously what was the brand for, and attributed to the number, like proportional with the need. Can be similar, or implicit is basically you can have prompted things, but it's not just them saying whether yes or no, but it's randomized with a lot of noise prompted questions, and whether they can really fast say, yeah, I could see it here, and you will see the examples right away. So I think I'm going to move into the platform and show you like concrete cases, but maybe it would help me if you would tell me what is the most interesting maybe format you deal with, or whatever. I don't know whether we have time for all of them, but if you have any preparations, I have a lot of video ads, digital or TV, and I was thinking about 2 different approaches or perspective. We can do both of them. One is the branding study, the other is the emotion, and I can show 2 different, like the Amazon and KLM ad I have prepared as basically the showcase of 2 of like old way of storytelling in video ads that is less effective, like the traditional story arc, and the new that is more effective in the low attention era. Then I have some statics, and also what we do a lot, especially for, I didn't mention that we work for a lot of like agencies as well, VCCP, Publicis, and others, and like local ones as well. And they often like test concepts or storyboards, or even audio concepts, or whatever. So if you have any preference,
I'm gonna go with Susanna here, because she dropped something. Brand concepts or storyboards as a starting. Yeah, basically the last point as a starting point. Because my suspicion is that we are all fairly familiar with being able to pre-test TV ads in out of home, because System One talks a lot about it. But that last bit feels a bit under discussed. So maybe let's start there. And
perfect. Okay, so
if anyone has any other requests, by all means, drop them in. It's like ask for a track at your local club. But for now, we'll do storyboards.
So yeah, I have a workspace here which is partially mockup data, because some of the data we're not allowed to like show. Some of them are real. I'll comment on that. So basically, I'll start with maybe before I go to the details of the details you can have. There's a lot of them. Let's go there. But maybe first start with the formats that can be tested. So basically anything. We have different benchmarks apparently for the different types of the formats. So when you start with the early idea, you literally can start with the text, which is obviously the least predictive, and the more like real is getting, the more predictive it is. But still, it's quite guiding. And we had a case study, for example, for E.ON, the German electricity provider, and we tested they had 4 agencies, 4 like topics, and they started with the text idea, and then they got the like a visual and like applications, and going later and later, and always the ranking of the concepts were similar. So this is already quite like predictive. So you can start with the text. Then I think the most often like what agencies use most often for persisting is storyboards, which is basically something like that. Again, let me first just show you the formats, and then I'll go into the details. Yeah. What I would totally suggest here is to move easily from this old way of doing storyboards to something that is called storyboard video. And I'll play the amount of energy moving from storyboard to storyboard video is not that huge, and the predictiveness is very different. So what you do is to put it into the slideshow and put there a voiceover. This one is a little bit more sophisticated with a couple of animations, but it can be just a simple slideshow with the voiceover, and
sending it spinning into motion.
And
The world
totally,
around begins to spin as the cap accelerates and stops at a wooden board.
Even the easier way.
The camera tilts the table, letting the cap
Okay,
glide.
so I think you got the idea. So what it allows us is to use the second-by-second curves and the methods we use for the video, and the amount of the insights that you already get from this is like much more detailed. So you basically can understand how heavily it is branded throughout the video. And we're gonna maybe talk about that later when I show you the video ads. But it's really important to have all of the three curves maximized during the as much time as you can. The typical old way to start with the emotion and then introduce the brand, it just doesn't work that well in the brain. So that one is basically, I think, the best thing, for example, to also use in, if you can use it in pitches, and often agencies really like our subscribers themselves, and when they are organized enough and they can finish the page sooner than one night, than the night before the page, then it helps a lot. So moving to the real cases, that one is actually a real case that won the pitch for VCCP. It's something I would call it that it's something in between the concept of a brand platform and the brand asset. So they basically said, hey, we're gonna like the main part of this brand platform is gonna be this fluffy character. And yeah, and this is like a travel agency, also part of like bigger like rebranding, or let's say like really starting the real brand. And so they presented it, they won. Like funny enough, without the data, what would be the reaction of the client would be the reaction that you can find here among the people who actually didn't like it, because there's a lot of like qualitative data as well, the first associations. And there are people like, hey, it's fluffy, and basically most of your business is like sandy beaches, so it's completely incoherent. And that would be maybe the main case that client would use against that. But they could immediately show that, hey, yeah, there are people like you, but it's 3% of people, and most of the people actually really love it. So this is quite an easy, affordable way how to prepare for the possible backlash. Basically imagine that the client, imagine the other side where they're sitting and they should decide about the future of the company, and then there's someone really eloquent and whatever, but then someone comes and they finish the deck and the presentation strong with, hey, we've already tested it on your target audience, and this is basically all three key drivers that are predictive. So do they like it? Do they recall the brand? And does it link you to the like needs that you need? For the brand platform, I would say that the need is not as important, because you have to be flexible here. It should be more flexible for your future growth into other areas. But yeah, basically, as I was saying, there's a couple of like messages you can test. So in this case, it's not that important if you're already doing a real concept of the campaign, it's super important that the people recall your message. Have you tested synthetic audiences? Like, this is all panel-based. So far, we don't see that synthetic audiences are like reliable enough for emotional prediction and the need prediction. We already have a part of like synthetic audience that is in video testing, and that is the attention prediction. And we were digging into the data, and since the where people look is like a secondary metric that guides you, I can show you a great little case study where really just by putting the logo where the people look is really important. So that's great, and that's where we use synthetic audiences, because basically it's trained on hundreds of thousands of eye tracking experiments, and it's really predictive to where people look. Yeah, so partially maybe it's getting there with the emotional prediction, but it's not there yet. So yeah, so most of this is panel based. Okay, so if you have any questions to the like concepts, guide me, unless we can maybe move to other. Oh, one last thing, you can test audio. It's really important, like Rob mentioned it. So the same way, this is again a very simple like concept here.
Is your dog turning its nose up at food again? Try Crumkies, the dog food that'll get even the pickiest pup dancing. Just listen to that. Your dog's loving it, and you get peace of mind. Better make space in the pantry, because your dog's gonna want more. Yep, your dog.
So again, you could see the peak where with the strange sound of the dog, so you already know what they're reacting for, what they're most likely remembering. Again, the another principle is if you have an emotional peak, the closer you have the branding to the emotional peak, the more effective ad, because this is the moment that people remember most, those seconds. So if there's a brand in audio or in the video ad, it works. So those are the typical concepts. Any questions to this?
I'll do a roundup of questions at the end, but just one comment on like the audio thing. I find quite interesting because you know, we see more and more a share of ad spend going to the likes of like podcast advertising, or even, you know, I know people who help broker podcast partnerships with brands, but they're just telling me the other day, like the measurement infrastructure is so bad in audio environments, and like what she calls kind of decentralized media, where essentially it's just like all these different podcast networks doing their own thing. So I think something like this just gives you a really good degree of like confidence that, you know, say if you're doing audio advertising for the first time on a podcast, it's like, okay, you can probably make this work, because there's tons of evidence that audio advertising is really effective at being remembered. But this just kind of gives you a bit of that reassurance right at the beginning that it is right to put sufficient media spend on
and also,
it.
frankly, the podcast ads are typically really under-branded. So they typically just mention the brand once, twice, and within like two minutes. And that's really not enough. So this can also show you the degree to which you have to be branding. And the smaller, I can also show you the case studies of like some smaller brands here. I have like Mikazu one that is, the smaller you are, the heavier the branding has to be so that the people have some kind of brand recall. And that means that if you're starting with some high reach advertising in podcasts, you have to be more serious about really mentioning the, and if you have some sonic anchor, sonic call, that helps.
Yeah. Do you have yeah, I mean, is it worth, so does Blue Style kind of qualify as out of home, or what was like, what was the format?
This was frankly, this was a concept. I don't think that those were the real ads that they used. So this was basically used as quite a like already polished way of testing the brand platform. But in that case, we're testing this longer. If we test outdoor, which is, for example, this example, I think you know this famous Coke ad. So this is outdoor. So this is tested really like with 2 seconds like attention span. So we just show it for the 2 seconds. And then in this case, obviously, most of the people will tell this is a code with it. But here, I think the really interesting question is whether will people get the message, get the fun message of this is like basically a smash bottle within the 2 seconds. And again, there's also, you can filter for audiences. So there's a interesting story that really the recyclers are the people who are getting this immediately. And I think that it was actually the strategy here, that they wanted to appeal to the recyclers and make them feel good and like, you know, share this like kind of insight or whatever. While if you switch to the, so the people, it's here is like people are getting mostly, it's green here, the message. But if you shift to the like general population, if you get to this message, it's like a little bit worse already. So basically, if you don't recycle, you're less likely to understand that. In that case, as you can see again here in the details, definitely the emotion is connected to whether people got it or not. And there's quite a lot of people not getting it. But on the other hand, it's such a like distinctive, great creative. That's definitely worth. There's no backlash against it, definitely.
I don't know if it was by design or not, but that suggests to me, like you were saying, so they were targeting recyclers in the hopes that they would then maybe advocate for, like, you know, if they saw someone drinking,
I wasn't
mentioning that they should recycle the bottle. So the recyclers become the media for that message for their friends who are not recycling.
I would say they weren't trying to get people recycling. It was more like, let's use the sentiment around recycling to like support the feelings around like our brand and make people feel good because they're recycling.
So that's interesting. So rather than going, we're going to get more Coke drinkers to recycle, it was actually, we're going to get more recyclers to drink Coke.
It's actually hard to get more Coke drinkers to recycle, but we'll not sure.
Just in terms of, I'm going to pick up a question just because it's appropriate for this, something you said about smaller brands. So a question from Ben McCluskey about, for smaller brands that have built a range of distinctive assets, say they only have a distinctive logo, does that imply their logo should be visible for as long as possible throughout their ad?
Totally. Let me show you 2 examples of the video, and one is going to be like digital video. So this is the one for quite a small brand. So first, you never get, if you're a small brand, you should have a different benchmark a little bit, because you never can have such a strong brand recall as a big brand, because, you know, it helps that it's already, the big brands already invested into the memory. So it's easier we just did a study and we just showed the same picture with the logo in the corner. And either the logo was a big brand, famous, well-known brand, or it was a starting brand. And different people saw it for 2 seconds. So the smaller brands got much smaller recall with the same picture, logo in the corner. So if you're a big brand, you can kind of get away with just a logo in the corner and it helps, though it's not the best branding. But if you're a small brand, you literally have to have the super strong branding. So this is quite a good example, the Stitch Fix. Obviously, there are other problems, as you can see, with the emotion and others, but in the branding point of view, it's
so convenient. Anyone can have a stylist.
The ease of use and the time you save, not having to go from store to store.
You go through the style quiz. What is your fit? What's your style?
It's upon you to decide how much you're spending.
The interactions you have with the stylist is phenomenal.
I work, I'm a dad, I'm on a budget.
Got my first package. The fit was fitting. There's no subscription. If I look good, I feel good. And Stitch Fix does that for me.
Stitch Fix, online personal styling for.
So this is quite a good branded ad, given it's a smaller one. But as you can see, there was too many messages. That's why the need recall overall is quite low, because they were saying just too many things. And also, like, most of the people will tune out because, you know, emotionally it's not that strong. So it's not an example of the best ad. But what we again see in the metadata, that if you can get just one thing right and you're a small brand, it's the branding. It's more important than emotion and more important than the need for the growth at the early stage. And yeah. So that's it, and that's sometimes again, because what System1 really does is they work with a lot of the big brands, and that's why they talk so much about the emotion, because it's much easier for the big brands to get the branding right, frankly. So emotion is really more important for the big brands. It's always important, but it is really hard to get everything right. So if you're a small brand, heavy branding is bad. And back to the question, if you have the brand codes right from the beginning, it's always better, because it allows you to have like emotional ads and still heavily branded. If you choose a brand mascot or character, you know, Liquid Death, how long have they been around? Like since 2019 or something like that. And they're so distinctive in their brand codes and so consistent that those brands are totally heavily branded, and they're not showing the logo like on the product that much.
What's interesting about that, although I know Liquid Death is kind of a we all use that example, but what's interesting about it is that the branding is central to everything, all the way to the typography. Like it's all very like metal, and you're slightly scared of what's happening. But also the fact they have that really crazy character where his head is a beard. Like they just really understand that it's more than just having like the brand on the top right corner of your pre-roll, you know. Just one other question here from Al, and then I'll just do the final section and then give people, you know, the last 10 minutes to think of other questions. But when using emotion to make an ad more memorable, have you seen any evidence that it's more effective to focus on the pain of the problem or the joy of the payoff?
No, I don't think I have the data that would tell that one or other. I really think that it's not that important what is the emotion from, if you can still get like brand recall and need recall high. I think the only reason why it's typically good if the emotion is around the brand, for example, is because it's easier to have a strong branding than and all the things at the same time. But if I imagine that you can have any kind of unrelated emotion, very strong one, and still get the strong occasion recall and the emotion, I've seen ads like that working a lot. So I don't really think that you have to even be consistent in the way you create emotions. You don't have to, for example, like I've seen a local ad here in Prague. There's a brand who's a lot about nostalgia, and a lot of their ads are about nostalgia. But then they have just super funny ads, completely different archetype, let's say. And there's a evidence that archetypes are just bullshit, you know, that you have to be coherent in the way you create emotions. So it's more practical, the practicality, how to make the emotion rather than what is it related to.
Yeah, even that's interesting, right? Because like rather than spend 5 workshops trying to find what is the emotion you want to build, it's like just build some or any, you know, and kind of see in the processing environment what works
more
best.
important is really link to from need and be consistent, because the brand codes that are consistent are basically, so use them, don't change them that much. That's why I think again, so consistency is important in terms of what has already been invested in the memory. That's where it's important, not whether it's or.
There's 7 minutes left. I'm just going to do the last section, and if anyone has any other questions, please let us know. Otherwise, you can always, you know, we'll send an email after, and you can always reply to that, and I'll pass any questions to you in the team. But I'm going to take over just for the final bit of the deck. Is that all right?
Okay.
So we're definitely further down than that. So yeah, like, look, I think these are the sorts of things that, as a practitioner of strategy and working in advertising, it's really helpful to have all this evidence. But we wanted to leave you with some practical things you can do next, right? Because otherwise it's like there's all this evidence and you go, great, I don't know how to apply it. So I just wanted to leave you with a few thoughts. Firstly, have a think about who, when, and how. So who, someone asked earlier about B2B. So the sweet spot for this sort of testing is B2C, just because, you know, you're going a lot of time with net rep samples, it's just easier to recruit, etc. B2B marketers are not impossible, it's just harder to recruit because typically, and this isn't just a behavior thing, like in general, panel data is much rarer when it comes to B2B. It's not impossible, right? You can kind of, you know, if you have existing data, et cetera, you can do something around that. But, you know, discussing with the team, B2C is definitely a sweet spot. By all means, email them to ask about B2B. I've inquired in the past for kind of automotive aftercare decision makers in like workshops, and they're like, dude, that's too niche. But there might be other things where it's like, you know, independent financial advisors. There's far more of those, right? So definitely get in touch if you want to do any B2B recruitment, but B2C is definitely the kind of the sweet spot with almost certainty. When to do it? So I think it's the sort of thing that, you know, as someone who works works with a series of agencies, I would definitely talk about this stuff as part of strategy development, because you're going to be assessing how clients are measuring and what their capabilities are. You know, it's the sort of thing that, especially if you're proposing something new, it really makes sense to kind of bake it into the scope discussions. New biz proposals, whether you're kind of pitching to someone new or trying to cross-sell to existing clients. So Easy mentioned that, you know, the likes of VCP and Publicis have used this to win pitches. So it's definitely a use case that, you know, certainly in mid-sized to bigger agencies, there are research budgets baked into business development. So take advantage of those. Or even in things like, you know, if you're doing a QBR or you're kind of doing an evaluation with maybe a new CMO or whatever, internal sessions can also be good, just to kind of, you know, get a sense from a third party of like what your work is actually achieving for the business. And then how, you know, in classical fashion, if you get in touch with the behavior team, they'll send you like all the material you need to kind of make the case internally, but also they offer to help you either workshop it or kind of sell it in. So I would definitely encourage you to get in touch with them, because, you know, with stuff like this, and at a fraction of the cost of what you'd think pre-testing usually costs, it can be really effective, especially if you're not like in that top 1% of ad spend where, you know, they already have all the top providers doing all the things, and it's all very expensive and a bit slow. You know, for most brands, these sorts of tools should be more accessible. And you know, the reason I got really excited by Behavior is because they kind of, frankly, they help me solve a lot of problems in my own day-to-day when talking measurement with clients. So in summary, talked about the problem, the link between need, brand, and emotion. Talked about the solution, you know, market tracking, pre-testing, understand everything underpinned by behavioral science, and executing it, getting started. I do look at your live projects, where can this be useful? Look at new business opportunities, whether you're pitching to a new client or cross-selling existing one, or any like QBR, you know, quarterly business review sessions or anything like that, where it's useful to start talking about better ways of evaluating what the work is doing, so that you keep buying into, you know, you keep reinforcing people's commitment to the right brand platform or the right creative vehicle, et cetera, et cetera. I just want to finish again to remind you that, you know, we're going to send this after, but there's going to be a little link here where you can get your own heat map with Behavior. So definitely take advantage of that. I most certainly will. We are going to look at the participation in the chat. I have kind of 2 or 3 contenders already in my mind about who wins the brand asset card deck. So we'll get in touch and arrange for this to be delivered to you. And I'll also send some details about this hands-on workshop. But basically, if you go to this link here, salmonlabs.co/crew, you join that, I'll have everyone's data in the back end, and we're going to be giving away a hands-on workshop to people who are part of that, and a bunch of other goodies as well as part of it. But yeah, definitely check this out when I send the link, because there's a lot of good value here that I think you could take advantage from. And so, yeah.
No, thanks a lot, and feel free to like share even feedback if this was helpful, or if you
absolutely
have for later. So please, if you have a minute left, we'll be happy.
Yeah, this is the first thing we've done together, and you know, I think we're both quite pleased yesterday reviewing the deck. But are there areas you'd like to learn more about? Are there other parts of Behavior? Do you want to learn about market tracking? Do you want to learn about all the other stuff they do? By all means, any tracking or testing gnarly questions, just let us know. I think we'd be happy to organize something that's even more like specific to what people want. If you have tracking needs or testing needs, by all means, that's Yeezy's email. If you want to do any workshops or strategy sprints or just some good old consulting work, you can come to me. But thank you very much for attending. And yeah, appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. See you.
See you, everyone. Oh man, a lot of emoji. Look at that. Right, I'm gonna start recording.
And we have to stay here because then we'll lose the conversation. So we have to copy that.